Okay, so we wound up over here where we could see our number of living neighbors that are here. So the next thing I want to do is determine what's going to be the next status for each of these guys. So again, just sort of building this up a little bit at a time. Let's say next status. And we're going to pass in our cell. At this point, we've got our live neighbors equals this. Nearest alive neighbors based on the cell. And we could just make sure we got this right again. And if this is right, we should see pretty much the same thing we saw before. Again, I should see at least this is going to be 3 here. So actually, let me just return this. So we've got this. So that looks pretty good. Okay. So now we want to determine the next status. So now, at this point, again, what you're doing is we're engineering this. We're breaking this up into smaller steps. I mean, at some point, maybe we could refactor something and come up with the idea of a game of life cell to not have to pass the cell around all the time. But again, this is a sort of a nice starting point where you could see that at no time am I adding any sort of sizable code to do this. Trying to avoid, writing that much stuff. I just want to get a little bit of this working at a time. So now I'm going to say, what was our method here? We've got this is alive. I'll say if this is alive, cell, meaning am I alive? Okay. So my next status, I'll say is alive, what do we do? So we're going to end up only staying alive, pardon the pun, but we'll return alive. And when is that going to happen? We'll say if alive neighbors dot length equals 2, or alive neighbors dot length equals 3, then we return alive. Otherwise, we're going to return dead, right? So if we're alive and we've got 2 or 3 neighbors, we're going to be in good shape. Otherwise, if we're dead, we only end up coming back to life if we've got 3 alive neighbors. Again, this can be drawn out at some point, but still, this is our logic, right? This is the engine that determines, how the game actually works. So when people are talking about, is my logic right? It's hard to see the logic if you have a bunch of loops here. But again, assuming that all these other methods are right, then this looks correct, right? If the cell is alive, if the length is 2 or 3, it stays alive. Otherwise, it's dead. Otherwise, we know it's dead. If the number of live neighbors is 3, it's going to be alive. So let's take a look and see if this is going to work. So what this should tell us here is that what cells are going to be alive. We know that this first one should end up living. So they're all dead. That doesn't quite look right. So if the alive neighbors are 2 or 3, let's just do a nearest alive neighbors. So that doesn't look right. This guy should stay. This guy is dead. He should end up coming alive. So let's just debug this a little bit. Console.log alive neighbor. Then we'll be focusing on that one sort of edge case of this corner one here. So we've got 3 neighbors here. And let's see if we're making it in here. Oh, let's actually do this. This is a live cell. And we'll say this is living. Oh, I don't know why I'm doing that. I apologize. So this is not silly. This is the count that I'm getting back. So here, if I just say a live neighbors, that actually looks a little bit better. The less dots we have, the better shape we're in. And so now, if I go back here, I should see that at least this first one is going to be alive, and we've got some other ones that are going to end up staying alive as well. So assuming that we have the right next statuses here, what we could do is set the status. So we've got these cells. You notice that up here, we've got this data status. And just really simplistically here, we could say, hey, look, cell.set attribute, and this is going to be this. We'll call this data status is what we're setting. What are we setting it to? We'll say this next status cell. And we can actually just give this a quick check by going over here. And if we step, the way that we can actually see if this is working is that we can use our console. If we end up selecting this element here, we can see that the data status is going to be alive, right? So we're setting it to alive. So what we want to do, once we determine all the statuses, what we can do now is do another for each cell. And we could set the class name for each cell to be equal to the cell dot get attribute data status. So that's why we have to do those first 2 loops. That makes sure that people were setting, maybe changing classes as they went through, but that's not going to work because you're going to be in an infinite loop. You'll be in an infinite loop as things are changing. So if we run this, we should be able to start stepping through this and actually seeing something. And here, this is considered stable because nothing's going to be changing here. We could play around with this until we have nothing. And that's generally how things work. You could mess around with this, give this some kind of thing, and see this thing go on and on. So let's stop this here.